Hi there, and welcome to the Play Therapy Circle. Before we begin, please note this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It does not provide therapeutic advice, and listening does not create a client therapist relationship. All views expressed are my own, and any case examples shared have been de identified to protect privacy. If you're seeking personal support, please reach out to a qualified mental health professional in your area. Hi, and welcome to an episode of the Play Therapy Circle. I'm Kylie Ellison, a therapist, clinical supervisor, and play therapy trainer, and I'm so grateful you're here. This podcast is a space for thoughtful, soulful conversations about child-centered therapy, play-based work, and what it means to show up with presence and compassion, both for our clients and for ourselves. Whether you're a seasoned play therapist, a student just starting out, or someone deeply passionate about working with children, you belong here. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Play Therapy Circle podcast. I'm your host, Kylie Ellison, and I am so glad you are here. Guys, I feel like I start every podcast like that, and I just need to let out a big guys. If you have been having a tough week, when I say I see you, like I'm not even kidding, I see you. I was only saying to the guys today, it feels like a week in 2 days. We've lived a week in 2 days. So how are you guys doing? How is it that it's the 1st of March on Sunday? Like for reals. I have been up since 5 a.m. That is not normally me. I'm not normally a morning person. I have vlogged today. I do a Tuesday day in the life video for anyone who follows us on my practice page. Oh, sometimes I think I post it on the podcast sometimes too. If you follow us on Instagram or TikTok, you'll find us there. So I will do kind of a day in the life to kind of say, this is what I do. And so I've been up since 5 because I do supervision with my incredible clinical supervisor, Dr. Jody Mullen in the US. So with the time difference, it's like, well, I've self-inflicted it. I have offered to do 5 a.m. So I am completely the problem here. And it's also like my commitment to trying being organized this year, but I'm not yet a morning person. So there you have it. So it's been a massive day, and I can't even tell you how many appointments I did today. There's just too many. And I need to be home, like leaving in about half an hour. So this is going to be a rapid fire podcast. Let's be real. I actually don't do that. It's probably going to be longer. So I just want to say hello to everyone. We are now in 44 countries. 44 countries across the globe that we have listeners. So, for any of you who are listening outside of Australia, welcome. You are so important and an incredible part of our Play Therapy Circle community. So, thank you so much for your support. There is so many countries listed on there. I can't list them all of what we can see in the back end of who checks out our podcast. So I'm so grateful if you are sharing the podcast with fellow practitioners. Thank you so much. I hope that you are still finding this useful and helpful. I was just writing it up. It's the 33rd episode, you guys. If anyone has been following me from July last year when I started this, I never thought I would have committed to this for this long. I am late diagnosed ADHD. So like there is very little chance that when I start something that I will finish it. So this, if that tells you how committed I am to this project, it certainly should. I just want to start off like it's Tuesday, right? So it like I said, I feel like it's been a week in 2 days, and I can't even tell you how much I feel that. I have the rest of the week. I am doing my clinical training program, and we're starting with a new cohort of students. So I'm so excited tomorrow to connect with some beautiful people to start their play therapy learning journey. So it's so exciting. So I have a great rest of the week. But if you are anything like me, my to-do list is not looking good, you guys. It is really long and it's not making any progress. So pray for me. I think hopefully I should get to it tomorrow. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see how we go. We'll see how we go. I'm hoping my mic it's making a funny noise. So I'm hoping on your end, this all sounds okay as well. For anyone who has had a massive week in the last week since we've last connected. For those of you who do the incredibly important work of holding children's stories in the playroom and supporting the children and families that you work with, I just want you to feel seen and acknowledged and recognized for the incredible, important work that we do each and every day in the playroom to hear children's stories. So, the topic for today, I obviously am always inspired by the stories that I hear from my supervisees, from the clients I work with the practice that we have, and the incredible families that we get to connect with. And so, today's episode I've titled Behaviour is the Messenger, Listening Beyond What We See. Because I think that one of our superpowers as child-centered play therapists, I'm going to call it that, but I don't know if it's actually referenced anywhere as that. I'm just calling it that. I think one of our superpowers is the fact that when you really understand what children are telling you through play, that communication is very clear, but not necessarily to everyone else. So I think that one of the things that I want to emphasize in this podcast today is around the idea of what I always say all behavior is communication. What is being communicated in the various ways that children show up in the playroom and how they present outside of play therapy as well, because all of that gives us incredible information that we as adults don't necessarily initially look for, but as play therapists are very skilled to do. So I want to kind of give that opening sort of question or wondering or reflection to start today around what if it's the most honest communication the child has, their behavior? What if that's the only way that they can honestly and truly and transparently tell their story? Not through words, but through their behavior and through their play. So, I really want us to explore and unpack today, looking at behavior as more being not something that needs to be addressed and necessarily reprimanded or have consequences for, but what are they communicating and what are they telling us about their world, their understanding of relationships with others, and how they're doing from a mental health perspective themselves, because that's all a part of it, right? So, what I think is challenging in modern parenting practice is we have so much information out there, right? And I've talked about this in previous podcasts with you guys around that idea of going back to basics with parents. When I'm doing parent consultations, I'm not giving them a handout and 20 strategies. I mean, no one would give a parent 20 strategies, right? But I'm really working hard not to overload parents because they just need a space for them to, be able to regulate themselves so they can regulate others. So that's really important. So I think that my message has always been going back to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs and checking in with the parent and the family system, whether that's foster carers, residential workers, whoever that is that you're working with. But I think it's a really important part of the work that we do is communicating to stakeholders that behavior as communication, not compliance. They're two very different things. And I think if we go and understand children from the lens of their behavior communicating either an issue, a problem, an unmet need, an experience, something that's happening for them in their lives, our jobs as play therapists is to have a deep curiosity around that. It's why certainly traditional approaches that do a more directive style of intervention with kids never really kind of landed for me anyway. I felt that it really kind of missed the child, their viewpoints, and what's going to work for them as well as you. And so I know in child-centered play therapy, we take that time to understand what the child is communicating to us. And I often say to play therapists that what the child is telling me about their issue and how they're coping is a great launch pad for us in our parent consultations to say, Johnny's telling me this in play therapy about the struggle that they're having, and then how they try to regulate afterwards. And then they try and please other people and try and repair and fawn and do all of this work afterwards because they're upset about that rupture in their relationship with their caregiver. And so that is a really great starting point to say, is that what you're seeing outside of play therapy? And if that is the case, and if I'm onto something, and I always say to my supervisees when I'm listening to their descriptions of play therapy sessions and sequences of play, and then I'm giving back that feedback to them, I always caveat with, and anyone who's listening who's my supervisor will know this well, I will always caveat by saying, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong because, and usually I'm not. Just spoiler alert. I'm usually not, and I don't mean that from a conceited perspective. I think once you hone that skill of listening to play and listening to the behavior of the child from their perspective about what they're communicating, you can't unhear it. And it becomes something that I really channel pretty quickly now in my practice. And I know for those of you who are more experienced would likely experience the same. So when we're talking about behavior, behavior is the nervous system language. So when we're talking about verbal processing, that doesn't happen for kids because it's not developmentally acceptable or accessible for them, right? It's not developmentally appropriate. We know that children, especially when they're in distress, especially when they're struggling with a situation, when they're trying to communicate their feelings or their viewpoints, are not going to do so with verbal communication. That's just not a part of who they are and how they work. Children will play it out and they will show us through their behavior. So, what does that look like in the playroom? It looks like things like that fight, flight, fawn, and freeze that we all know very well in the process of that bottom brainstem being activated when they are feeling threatened. So we know that this is part of a child's presentation in the playroom alongside that concept of the window of tolerance. We also know aggression can be used and displayed in the playroom as protection. They're actually trying to protect themselves, but it looks like aggression. So taking a minute to really understand, and we talk about this from a very psychodynamic lens in terms of child-centered play therapy. And I really will try and get into more of those topics in the coming weeks and months because I've just had so many reflections and experiences around those times as play therapists where we experience transference and countertransference. So I want to talk more about that in the weeks ahead. But when we're talking about how the child will put us in the position of them so that we understand what's going on in their world, because developmentally they operate from that egocentric lens, we can really start to understand the deeper meaning when we put ourselves in the position of them. And what are they trying to communicate with their behavior? We have examples of kids withdrawing or going within as a way of keeping themselves safe. That's their way of communicating. It's not to become dysregulated, scream, cry, all of those things in the playroom. Sometimes it's complete withdrawal because they're in that fight or flight state. They will absolutely try and control things in the playroom because what we know about kids who feel an external locus of control, when they feel like things are happening to them that they have no say over or have no voice of, they will try and control and have predictability in the playroom to feel that sense of safety. So we see that it's not just them trying to dominate the playroom. There's a deeper meaning there. Chaos can certainly look like overwhelm in the playroom. It doesn't have to be just in their play. It can be holistically. It can be in that transference and countertransference space. So it's really important that we are not just looking at behavior in the playroom and saying, oh, well, we're in the second stage of play. I guess there's some aggression there. That makes sense. They're processing feelings of anger and frustration. We absolutely need to be taking that step further to seek to understand, and that comes from the therapeutic alliance, that comes from the therapeutic relationship. We cannot do anything deep and meaningful in the playroom until we have established that working relationship with a child, which we know is the first stage of play therapy, right? It's the warm-up stage. Once we've built that safety and trust, it means then both us as the play therapist, but also the child has this opportunity to be vulnerable. And we can't get there either for us or the child, if we don't feel that sense of safety both ways. So once we have that, it's so important that for us as play therapists, we have that courage to sit in the uncomfortable, to connect at a deeper emotional level, to really understand what is happening for the child in real time, what they are telling us about their world and their understanding of relationships with others. So if you are finding right now that you are certainly, as a beginning play therapist, or early in your career, very mindfully watching the play and making sure you're noting themes and stages of play. Absolutely, there's nothing wrong with that. I want to, for anyone listening who really wants to expand their skills, I want to give you that invitation to expand your learnings and your processes, to consider what is happening emotionally in the playroom, not just reflecting feelings, but what do you notice in the room, in that transference and countertransference space, that really does give us that next layer of information that makes our meaning making and our understanding of what the child is communicating to us so much richer and so much more valuable. So, we absolutely are looking at behavior as communication, 100%. We're looking at the playroom as a space to be able to process those things. And I think that this is where sometimes we really face challenges as child centered play therapists. And I know many of you experience this each and every day, but and we did the episode last week talking about, how kids communicate trauma, and how we know that children communicate that through play far more readily than they do through verbal communication. We also know that in the playroom, if they have that safe place, they can begin to make sense of and understand what's happening through their behavior, through their play, through their role plays, their action orientated sequences of play, all of the things that happen in the playroom. So, what does that look like even more closely if we're kind of digging into that a little bit more? What do kids do in the playroom? They'll certainly use symbolism. So, we know that they will use different objects in the room to represent different family members, parts of their experiences, to be able to express feelings and talk through what happened to them. We know that there's repetition of those play sequences and what we call themes or those issues. So we certainly see repeated experiences of power and control, needing to be in charge, needing to have a say, wanting to win, because outside of play therapy, they may not experience that themselves. And what they do in the playroom that we all know in that behavior communication is put us in the position of them. So what happens is we are then made to feel powerless. We are made to feel like we have no choice. We are made to feel like we have no say and no way out and no a way to kind of navigate things or advocate for ourselves, because that's the position they've put us in to understand their world. It is incredibly powerful. It is a privilege and an honor, but it also comes with the challenge around us understanding that and trying to communicate that with other stakeholders, but not necessarily them having that same experience, because our training is unique. We get to understand the inner workings of children, and we get to understand how they communicate in their natural mode of communication, which is play. It is absolutely not in verbal communication that children are going to express their views, their wishes, their wants, their experiences, their feelings. That isn't going to come through verbal communication. It's always through that play-based work. So when we're looking at this in terms of the ways that this shows up, we know this happens in so many ways. Obviously, there can be different testing of limits in the playroom. They can be doing lots of role plays around huge sort of outbursts of aggression and then that repair. So, looking at that attachment work and understanding how that rupture and repair works. And certainly, as I said earlier, countertransference. Guys, when I say to you, it is the cornerstone of the work that I do. And for any of you interested in kind of going back to our historical roots of child-centered play therapy and how we began, and the precursor to child-centered play therapy in the 20s and the 30s around the psychodynamic psychotherapy lens, I genuinely encourage you to read up on it, because it really gives us such a clearer understanding of why in modern practice, transference and countertransference, but countertransference for us is absolutely essential for us to be able to understand at the core of what the child is trying to tell us. So we know too that when we see this behavior, it often helps us to understand in the way that they engage with us, their understanding of relationships with others that was formed in those formative years experiences. What that means is sometimes they may have a sense that people, especially for children in the foster care system, they may have a sense that people don't stick around, that people aren't consistent in their lives. And so they work through with us trying to reject us before we reject them, trying to push us away by testing us with physical limits or like high levels of aggression. And so we get to see that understanding of their attachment relationships. So, again, that doesn't just live in the playroom. For those of you in the advanced space, I want to plant the seed to you around that consideration that play therapy and child centered play therapy lives everywhere, you guys. It lives in our community, it lives in our playgrounds, it lives in the shopping center when we go to the shops and we see kids with their parents or their siblings. It is absolutely everywhere. All behavior is communication. So, I really want to encourage you guys to be considering not only what we're seeing in the playroom and the behavior that they're telling us, what is the countertransference that you pick up on, what are you noticing in terms of that attachment relationship and that attachment perspective that the child is sharing, but also what then activates for us. Because we, as child centered play therapists, it's not about, our issues and problems in the playroom, but it is certainly about recognizing that we bring ourself to the playroom. And so honoring that in terms of our understanding of what our own attachment experiences is so that we can process that outside of play therapy. But certainly noticing what comes up for us is absolutely essential in terms of doing this work. So I know along with that, we can sometimes feel this need to fix or to jump in and help, I guess, the child to feel better, to console, to if they are feeling stuck or lost or struggling to make a decision or any of those things, that it could be so easy for us to fix it. And what I want to say is, we are looking at certainly in the playroom this incredibly interesting space, which I just think expands us as practitioners. I am and will always be a lifelong child centered play therapist. I'm not in any way seeing myself as anywhere near experienced in my field after 10 years, 11 years. I have so much learning to go. And I think that that is the honor and the privilege of the work that we do, that we get to grow and become better versions of ourselves thanks to those kids that we connect with in the playroom. And so our own discomfort with dysregulation is something I put to you as part of those reflections. When we feel pulled to fix it, is it about the fact that we feel uncomfortable with that presentation? Do we feel, I guess, that pull to fix it so that we can reduce the noise, reduce the risk, rather than being able to sit in the uncomfortable? Does that resonate for you? Does it feel like you have supervision pressure or parental expectations or that tension between kind of containment and control? And I think that that kind of leans into that dilemma for us as play therapists around behavior reduction versus meaning making. And that really goes to, and my response to that, certainly that I want to offer as a space of self reflection for any of you listening, is we obviously put therapeutic limits in the room, and we always have the rules of thumb around, is it going to hurt me, hurt the toys, or hurt the child? That is like our basic tenets, right, of limit setting. And certainly the intention behind the ACT model is very much around validating the feelings of the child, communicating the limit, and offering a redirection to help them to develop those pro-social behaviors. That's the intention. I think that sometimes limit setting can be over or underused. So I think that it's certainly important that we are putting therapeutic limits in early. If we put them in too late, we end up missing that opportunity to help regulation for the child. So absolutely, those limits are needed. On the flip side, I think that if we don't put them in early and we let it go and we don't want to necessarily interrupt the play, And I had this kind of reflection not long ago with a colleague who was talking about a child that would, make a mess in the playroom just before the end of the session. So we'd literally kind of go through and pull all the baskets out, pull all the toys out, and create this kind of chaos before leaving. And we had a really important and reflective conversation, and it was just so special and important. And I felt very privileged to have that conversation around the difference between allowing a child to communicate what they need and understanding that that behavior is communication. And I hope I haven't lost anyone with that. But in that example, what I want to share is, and this far down the line, how I view it differently to in my beginning practice, where absolutely we do not want the child to feel that we are shifting their agenda or changing, their perspective on things, or interrupting the play. We absolutely don't want that to be the case. It's child led and it's their agenda. But I think that what we are finding with so many children that we connect with in the playroom is that they're actually crying out for those boundaries. And they do it in a way that is communicated through their behavior. So they are showing us that dysregulation because they've got no other tools in their toolkit to be able to communicate how they're feeling in terms of that sense of urgency, in terms of that sense of powerlessness, feeling like they have no choice, no say. And so I want to offer that reflection that when we have a child that might be showing us chaos in their world, 100% we want them to show us that. But what I want you to notice, again, going back to our Freudian roots, of that countertransference, because I know for me now, 11 years in, me a year ago, a year into play therapy, very different story. I would have had a very different answer. 11 years down the line, and lots of kids, in that incredible kind of memory bank I carry with me every time I go into a playroom. 11 years down the line, what I have learned is that sometimes they're actually needing us to put those limits in because they don't know how else to communicate their distress. So they are showing us their chaos, but they're also seeking that attunement, connection, and attachment. And the difference for me now is that I notice when I see a child do like that example of kind of starting to pull those things out, I immediately notice what comes up for me, not personally, but just in terms of that countertransference space of noticing what happens in the room. So oftentimes what will happen is it'll feel like things are escalating. It'll feel like the tension is rising. It will feel like there's a sense of urgency or unpredictability in the room. There's a sense of not knowing what's going to happen next. There's a sense of oftentimes an intentionality. And again, I am very much saying in the child space that this is unconscious. This is not them consciously choosing to do this. But I think in that space, when you feel that uncomfortability that comes up when we start to see kids really kind of pull those toys out, throw them around the room, cause that chaos, that is the opportunity to respond to that feeling, to that countertransference, to be able to support that child therapeutically. So obviously we would put a limit in if they are creating chaos in the room, but it's actually even more important to say, you have no other things you can say right now other than to show me, but in here, the toys aren't for throwing on the ground. It is so important to show me how you're feeling right now. We're here together, and I hear what you're saying. It is so important that we validate what the child is trying to tell us at a deeper level, so they don't need to continue to play that out, play that out, play that out, and making sure that we're offering that limit to them to let them know that it's the toys aren't for throwing on the ground. And you can play with the toys that you have on the ground. But I also want to kind of go to a deeper level of making meaning in that moment, that it just feels so chaotic in here. There is so much chaos, so much happening, and it is so overwhelming. Whoa, this is a lot. There is so much happening. And for me, even as I kind of role play that and channel that of an experience of a child like that in the playroom, the next thing that comes up for me in imagining what that child is trying to communicate to me is sadness. Because when we talk about that behavior as being communication, it's not just at that surface symptomology level, right? There is always something deeper in terms of that attachment experience, those formative years experiences. And if you have a child that has exhausted every other avenue to communicate how they're feeling and are literally down to kind of that physical aggression, fight or flight, chaos and destruction in the playroom, that is deeply sad. That is deeply heartbreaking to see a child feel that that is the only way left they can communicate. So I absolutely want them to know that, as Gary Lindsay would say, I hear you, I see you, I understand, and I care. So I'm not doing that if I just put limits in. I really, truly need to go deeper to say to them, in essence, I'm not necessarily saying the I statement, but in essence, saying to them, I see you. I see what you're trying to show me. Life feels so overwhelming. You don't know what to do next. It just feels like chaos. It feels like too much. And it's exhausting. And it's so sad. Like, really, really, you guys, kind of getting to that core level, because where else in a child's world are they going to truly have their behavior validated in a way that meets that core kind of issue of what they're trying to communicate to us, not that surface level? I always say to my students, if we are just looking at the symptomology, if we're just looking at the behavior, we miss the child. We miss the child. I went sideways with that conversation. That was definitely not on my plan. I'm looking at my plan and I'm like, nope, that was not what I had planned today. I really hope that, like, this is what happens when I connect with my supervisees when I do training. And you guys know, for any of those that have been listening for a while, you know what that's like. I go sideways, but I want to wrap this up because I need to get my groceries delivered. We have things to do. But I hope that this has been useful. I always want to kind of go back to that intention of every podcast to make sure that this makes sense, that people feel seen and heard, because that's the intention. I live and breathe my CCPT tenets. If I'm not helping support you guys to feel seen and heard, I've not done my job either. So I hope that in sharing my experiences and I guess certainly in the context of this, we're not discussing any client examples specifically. This is more generally to kind of give you guys that education around potential reflections to any child that you're working with. But I think that we have, as child-centered play therapists, such an incredible calling. And when I tell you guys that I have felt that calling now more than ever, and I think that having the podcast is a part of that, that I get to share my advocacy of child-centered play therapy, but also the work that child-centered play therapists do each and every day in the playroom, which is just the most important work out there in terms of child counselling. There are so many incredibly important child counsellors out there just to kind of, support all of our community. But, when we are able to support kids in the playroom and hear their story and help them heal through play, it's just such an incredible privilege. So we get to advocate for kids in doing this work. So what I would like to offer you in terms of some of these reflections to tie it back together and to wrap this episode up is, when we silence behavior, we silence the story. Let me say that again. When we silence the behavior of the child, we silence their story. When systems demand compliance, the children lose their voice. When systems demand compliance, children lose their voice, and play therapy becomes an act of resistance against reductivism. Whoa. Whoa, you guys. Oh man. I don't know about you, but just having this conversation today and just sharing this information just feels so good. It just feels so confirming for me. And I hope that it has been confirming for you too. I want you to know, for each and every one of you listening right now who are working in the playroom each and every day and doing the incredible child-centered play therapy work that you're doing, that your work matters. Your work matters. It is so important. And I am so proud of you, because this is not easy work. It is hard, tough going some days. And our job of being able to advocate and hear children's stories and communicate that is so incredibly important. And so I am so grateful to each and every one of you across the 44 countries that are listening today for all of your work that you are doing in help shape children's lives. I was reminded this morning, connecting with Jody, that when endings happen in child-centered play therapy, and we've talked about this in a previous episode, when they happen. What's so important for us to remember is that the child will remember how we made them feel years and years after we finish our work. And hopefully we've left them a little lighter, and hopefully we've helped them heal. So I am so grateful to each and every one of you. Hey, we have like so much. Oh my God, it's 5 o'clock. I literally need to go. I gotta wrap this up. We have so much going on. So please jump over to our social media. That is where everything is and will happen. So please go to at the Play Therapy Circle podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. If I remember to post on TikTok, I will. We are holding our very first conference. The Play Therapy Circle is coming together. We are meeting in person in October in Brisbane. And we are so excited to have our child-centered play therapy community together for a 2-day immersion experience, you guys. It is going to be so great. Me and Jody, 2 days. We want you there. Like, come along. Be part of this community because we absolutely adore and appreciate each of you. For those of you who are international, we are going to be recording so that you can access it afterwards. So we want to make sure that our international play therapy community, if you can't make it to Australia, we want to make sure that you get access to. So stay tuned to our socials and to our website. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for your support. As I always say at the end of every podcast episode, be kind to yourself and each other. Look after each other because you guys matter and you're important. Thank you so much. Big love to all of you. I will see you next week. Bye. Thank you so much for being here for another episode of the Play Therapy Circle. If anything resonated with you today, I'd love it if you could follow the podcast, share it with a colleague, or leave a short review. It really helps others find our circle. And if you have a topic or question you'd love me to explore, I'd love to hear from you. This space is for you, and I want it to feel like a conversation. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, you belong here.